right, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jamal El-Wahi. I'm working for Clarivate. I'm a solution consultant. I've been working for the group for the past 14 years. I'm based in Dubai, covering Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And I'm also a researcher at Leiden University in the Netherlands. So today's sessions will be about the support of research integrity with trusted data and tools. I do have a few slides to go through, and I want to explain what we do at Clarivate to support research integrity. All right, so the agenda is as follows. We'll start with some changes in the global research landscape. Then I'll go through the research and analytics solutions that we have at Clarivate. Then I'll focus on Web of Science core collection as a reliable source of data. Then I'll go through journal citation reports, and I will mention what we do in terms of responsible journal evaluation. Then I will speak about the responsible use of metrics, and then I will close with the peer review. All right, so in terms of scientific research landscape, you might have seen that changes are occurring. Things are changing in the world in terms of how we do research, and we do have issues appearing every day. There is something that I want to start with, which is the publishing practices. So the chart that you see on this screen is from The Economist, and so it's a report that you can read online. So it's an estimation of journals, number of journals, going back to the 1960s. And you see you have two main colors, the grayish and the orange one. The gray bars represent the reliable journals, in short, the good journals. And then in orange, these are the number of predatory journals. So you have a distribution per year and also a breakdown by field. So on the left-hand side, you see health, math, physical and chemical sciences, and then economics, and then biology. If you look overall, the trend is the following. Starting, I would say, mid-90s, and then a big boom in terms of number of predatory journals since, I would say, 2007, 8, right? And in 2018, we have about the same number of predatory journals and reliable journals, right? So it's about half. Half of the journals that we have today are considered as predatory. So when we say predatory, it's difficult to define what makes a journal predatory. Some journals, some publishers have practices that can be questioned, right? And the publishing model is changing, and that's the key sentence or key point in this slide, that they can undermine public trust in research and research integrity and represent significant waste of research resources. A short story, someone that contacted me, a PhD candidate from a country in the region, reached out to me and wanted to know, okay, what's happening with this journal? I don't know. I'm not sure about the situation. And you know, in some countries, to get your PhD, you need to have at least one published paper, so an article in an index journal, right? But some people don't know how to check if this journal is indexed, and that specific PhD candidate was approached by a journal. The PhD candidate didn't know about all these different requirements, what an index journal is, what a predatory journal is, and so on. Submitted the manuscript, and then very quickly, without peer review, the journal came back and said, okay, your paper is accepted. Please pay that amount of money. That was about $600. And as far as I remember, that's much, much higher than the minimum wage in that specific, right? So the key point here is to be careful. There are some journals out there that are only interested in your money. They're not interested in developing science. They're not interested in publishing good content, good scientific content, providing peer review services, editing services. So, and that is growing, right? So I'm sure you've been contacted by journals asking you to submit their paper, and they promise, you know, quick peer review, quick publishing process, and so on. So that's what we see, and unfortunately, those predatory journals are out there doing their own business. There is also an interesting study, and that you can see on the right-hand side. It's an article by Anna Abalkina. So I've put the link there, the DOI and the link to the article. It's a research article, and it says challenges posed by hijacked journals in Scopus. So this is a pretty new phenomenon, and we call that index jacking, which involves the systematic infiltration of hijacked journals into some international indexing databases. So you also need to be careful on this point. So the presence of hijacked journals is a challenge to scientific integrity due to the legitimization of unreliable papers that have not undergone peer review. So you could read this article, right? And it says that these hijacked journals obviously have far-reaching effects, right? So those papers published in those journals, they may be cited. There is unauthorized content from these journals, and you find this content in other databases like ORCID platforms like WHO, World Health Organization, COVID-19 research database, and so on. So this is obviously a challenge for researchers because this content, you don't want to reuse it, you don't want to cite it, you don't want to refer to it. And that also creates an issue in terms of research management, research evaluation in countries where, some journals are just cloned versions of other journals, right? So that's also another challenge that we see out there. Another problem is related to what we call multi-affiliation. So this is a growing problem of scientific integrity. So colleagues at Clarivate, along with colleagues in Spain and Simago, they collaborated and they wrote this paper shown on the right-hand side. So I've also shared the reference with the link to the article. But here, as a summary, these are the 3 points that we get from this article. So the past decade has witnessed a substantial increase in the number of affiliations listed by individual authors of scientific papers. So multi-affiliation is something quite common. You can be affiliated with multiple institutions. That's my case. For example, I'm affiliated with Clarivate, but I also do research with a university. So I have 2 affiliations. But the problem is that some researchers have a huge number of affiliations. So that's the second point. Some authors now list an astonishing number of institutions, sometimes exceeding 20, 30 or more. And that's a problem because how can a researcher be affiliated with that many institutions? And so this trend raises concerns regarding this genuine scientific contribution these authors make at each institution they claim to be affiliated with, right? So it's like you're being invited by so many different institutions. You have 10, 15, 20, 30 affiliations, but you cannot be there at the same time, right? So you can be affiliated with, let's say, 2, 3 institutions, and you spend some time, you share some time across or among those different institutions. Is it just an address that the author put there and they don't really contribute to the work being done by those institutions? So this is a chart from this study, and that represents the percentage of international multi-affiliation compared to the percentage of intranational multi-affiliation of the 50 countries with the highest scientific production in the Web of Science between 2008 and 2020, right? So you have 2 axes, right? Number of multi-affiliation compared to the percentage of international multi-affiliation. So certain countries have experience, and that's what we're saying. So of course we have a large group here, right? But then you have certain countries that have experienced an abnormal surge in international multi-affiliation authorships. So of course that is I would say a flag where, when you want to analyze the actual scientific contributions made by authors or by these authors, and the importance of making sure the integrity of scientific outputs and works is preserved, right? So you do have some extremes, as we can see here. Taiwan, China, Portugal. So this is intranational, and then you have international affiliation. So Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and so on. All right, so let me go through some of the solutions that we provide at Clarivate. We call them research and analytics solutions in the scientific academic research sector, and let's say government and academia sector. Right, so what we call the research and analytics platform is the following. It's a group of solutions, data, but also a combination of data, solutions, and expertise that we provide so that institutions can thrive in today's research climate. So you probably recognize some of the names shown on the slide. So Clarivate Web of Science, so that's a multidisciplinary database that indexes scientific content, journal articles, conference proceedings, reviews, books, book chapters, patents, data sets, and so on. And then out of the core collection, a database available within Web of Science, we built the journals and reports, right, which is related to journals. And that's where you get the impact factor and lots of citation metrics. Essential Science Indicators is also built on Web of Science um, uh, core collection journals, science and social science journals, to be more precise. Insights Benchmarking Analytics is built on the whole Web of Science core collection, used for research evaluation, where you can compare entities, researchers, countries, regions, fields, funders, and journals, as well as publishers. Then you have Esploro Converse. These two tools are related to the management of research information, and an institution wants to showcase the work that is being done at the institutional level. On the left-hand side, we have EndNote and RefWorks. These are two reference management tools that help researchers collect, manage, and format their references in an easy way. Pivot RP is the tool to go when you want to find funding opportunities, conference opportunities as well. And of course, the Web of Science for Research Discovery. That's the platform, the website. But behind that, we have data that you can access through APIs, as well as custom data in a structured format. Behind that, this is all powered by our editors, who spend their time every day to analyze select journals for indexation in the platform. Then we have ISI. That's our research center that produces intelligence, thought leadership, as well as creating new indicators, always with the fair assessment research integrity in mind. RP News, that's research professional news related to scientific research. And last but not least, the consulting teams that help institutions thrive in today's research climate. So our mission is really to enable research excellence across the research ecosystem. So we have three main themes or pillars. So research integrity, research effectiveness, and research impact. In terms of trends, each and every theme has a current trend. So when it comes to research integrity, so as I mentioned, we have a rise in fraudulent practices, and at Clarivate, to fix this issue, to overcome this issue, Clarivate focuses on a rigorous journal selection, trustworthy content, and metrics. Right. So this is at the basis of the journals that you find in the Web of Science core collection, as well as the conferences and the books. In terms of, and that creates content that you can trust. In terms of metrics, of course, in insights and journal status reports, those metrics are derived from that content that you can trust. And we also provide transparency on how these indicators are calculated. In terms of research effectiveness, the current trend is obviously there is a rapid content growth, right? Researchers are completely overburdened by content. It's easy right now to publish papers, more and more researchers publishing more and more papers, and the same applies to libraries. So the way we handle that at Clarivate is that we provide personalized user experience. That's something that you can do in the Web of Science, for example. We also focus on new content type, for example, preprints, dissertations, and thesis is also available now in the Web of Science. And we also provide workflows to reduce friction, so that you can focus on what's more relevant to you, right? So you would find, for example, in the Web of Science, suggestions of articles, suggestions of researchers, and suggestions of conferences, for example. So this is all personalized based on your profile. When it comes to research impact, the trend is that the high value outcomes that drive innovation and benefit society. So the way we handle that is at Clarivate, we provide research assessment best practices. I spoke about that already when I mentioned the thought leadership of ISI. And we also provide expanded measures of impact, right? Traditionally, people speak about number of papers, indicator, classic indicator of volume, and then you have number of citations for the impact, the H index, and so on. But that's not only it. There are plenty of measures that one can use to expand and have a more comprehensive view of the impact of an author, an institution, a country. The goal is to provide content, data, and metrics that you can trust. I spoke about the selection process already. As you may know, Web of Science does not index each and every journal that exists. Journals, publishers, they send the journal, they submit the journal for indexation. Our team of editors uses selection process, very strict selection process, 28 points of evaluation, 24 related to quality, 4 related to impact. And our content team and tech team will meticulously index the content, and that provides, of course, reliable data foundation. ISI is powering this analysis that are used in our company to provide metrics that you can trust. So in terms of content, I want to focus on Web of Science core collection. And that's what I mentioned earlier in my agenda. That's the source of reliable data based on the selection process that is done internally. So when we focus on Web of Science core collection, which is one database within the Web of Science, you have several collections or within the Web of Science core collection. The Science Citation Index Expanded, that's one database of journals publishing content in science, then social science, arts, humanities. So these are journals. Emerging Source Citation Index is also a collection of journals that are of the same quality. The reason we call it emerging is because those journals haven't got the same level of impact as other journals indexed in, for example, science or social science. And then we have books and Book Citation Index, which is actually two collections, Book Citation Index in science and Book Citation Index in social sciences. And the same with conference proceedings in science and conference proceedings in social sciences. A few statistics on the right-hand side, just to give you an idea of the data that you can use to assess your research with trusted data. And this data is used in major research evaluation initiatives. So we're talking about more than 90 million records in total. We mean publications. Clarivate is not a publisher, so this selection is done in a publisher neutral way. More than 2 billion linked citations, 254 subject categories. That's what people call fields. So you'd have not only chemistry, but you would have, let's say, inorganic chemistry, organic chemistry, physical chemistry, and so on, right? When we focus only on these four collections, we have about 22,000 high quality journals. I spoke about the data curation earlier. That's what we get when we unify addresses, and we have more than 18,000 disambiguated organizations, meaning we went and grouped the addresses, we group them and we unify the names. So we take the addresses of the authors in the publications and we unify those different addresses under disambiguated organizations or unified affiliations. So we index all the author names and affiliations in the database. We also get the funding information from different sources, but one of them is the acknowledgements. So when a researcher receives funding from an agency, we would translate that into funding information that we can analyze. In terms of conference proceedings, we have more than 300,000 conference proceedings indexed in the database. And in terms of books, book chapters, more than 140,000. Our primary sources are journals. There is no third-party database. Consistent indexing policies since the 1960s. The way we build the database is consistent. So you get consistent metadata, and that provides, obviously, consistent analytics. And it is used by major rankings and national evaluation assessments. Spoke already about the journal selection process, but here I want to give more details. I don't want to go through all the different elements that are analyzed by our editors, but in short, this is how it works. A journal or a publisher, the publisher wants the journal to be indexed in the Web of Science, would go and submit online the journal. There is an initial triage. So we need some information, some basic information. The ISSN is the unique or international standard serial number of the journal. It's like your passport number, one journal, one ISSN, and sometimes an electronic ISSN for those that have a presence online. I would say most big majority of them. Some journals only have the electronic ISSN. The journal title, of course, the journal publisher, the URL for online journals, access to the content, presence of peer review policy. So we need to have a presence of peer review policy on the website and the contact details to reach out to the editors if needed, right? So that's the initial triage. You would be surprised some journals fail this step. And some predatory journals or some dodgy journals don't have all of this information. For each and every step, two outcomes, either successful and then you continue to the next step, or unsuccessful and then you need to come back after fixing the related issue. Then you have editorial triage. You have, so these three steps are related to quality criteria. If you count, you get 24 criteria here. And then you have 4 criteria related to impact, right? So you have editorial triage, which would look at the content. We need the article titles and article abstract in English, but the full text can be in any language, of course. The references need to be written in Roman script. Language of papers need to be clear enough. Journals publishing on time, that's we mean timeliness, right? And many other elements that editors would look at to define and assess the quality of the journal. So here, if it's successful, then you start the editorial evaluation, right? If the journal is successful in terms of editorial evaluation, the journal will enter the what we call SK or ESCI, Emerging Source Citation Index, and it is evaluated for impact. If it doesn't have the impact but maintains the quality, of course, it stays in core collection in Emerging Source Citation Index. But if it, on top of the quality, it's matching 4 criteria of impact, then it enters Science Citation Index Expanded, SCIE, SSCI, which stands for Social Science Citation Index, or Arts and Humanities Citation Index, HCI, depending on the coverage, the topics, the scope of the journal, right? So this is all done internally by our colleagues. So it is conducted by a team of expert in-house editors. They're not affiliated publishers or research institutions. They're 100% fully dedicated to this job. And each editor focuses on specific subject categories. So they have a deep knowledge of the publishing landscape in their fields. The journal data and information is collected by the editors independently, rather than relying on external data providers or committees as it is done by other platforms. We don't use algorithmic approaches or delegate any editorial decisions on the research community. And all editors use the same set of 24 quality and 4 impact criteria for all the journals. So this is being done across all fields. In terms of data, if you want to do some analysis, if you have bad data, you would have bad analysis. So this is what we mean here in terms of the importance of data and metadata for bibliometrics or bibliometric analysis, where you want to count publications, number of citations, and so on, right? So we index what we call cover to cover. So all papers in a journal cover to cover, every issue of any covered journal is indexed with no content gaps. So we don't do a selection within the journal. If we say the journal is indexed, all the content, all the papers of the journal will be indexed, right? So all issues and all items in a published issue. We would also index, if we decide journal is indexed, we will index all authors and affiliations. They're captured and they receive full credit of the paper or the work that has been done and presented in a paper, whether they listed first or last author distinction in the publication, right? And all affiliations are captured. So if a researcher has 1, 2, 10, 15, 20 affiliations, we would also index all affiliations. On top of that, and that's what makes this or builds the citation index, we index all cited references, right? So articles can be listed in Web of Science in 2 ways, as a source article or as a cited reference. When you take a paper, right, you would have a list of reference or list of references. You take a paper, you would have a list of references, and every cited reference is indexed whether it refers to a covered source or to a source that is not covered, right? So you would find in Web of Science, you open an article, you can see the list of references. In the list of references, you'll have the full list. Some of these publications that are cited may not be indexed in the Web of Science, but they will still appear there. And if they're indexed, of course, you'll be able to click on the link in the reference and view the record in the Web of Science, right? So selectivity and data curation, quality control, and transparency. So in terms of data cleaning and curation of metadata, of course, the data that we get from journals, from different journals, is not structured the same way. It's not 100% clean. If we take, for example, addresses, we have more than 18,000 unified organizations, and we have more than 1,000, manual unification rules used for to unify addresses. So funders, I mentioned that already, more than 22 million records with funding acknowledgements in WOS core collection, in the Web of Science core collection. So the source of the funding acknowledgement comes from the funding text itself, from other sources like Medline or ResearchFish. Here is an example on the left-hand side, one institution in Sevilla, in Spain, right? So this is the name, different names of the same institution, right? Some of them, like D instead of DE, university in front, unit. You have also some spelling mistakes like Pabo instead of Pablo, or PBLO, and so on. So, but we know that we created those different rules, right? Unification rules to say we're talking about this institution, right? In terms of funding, you'll also find, for example, so this is for Spain, the different funders. If you look at one specific number of output, let's say this is for Spain, you would have a good understanding of who is funding this specific research, right? And we get that, as you've seen here. So the funding acknowledgement, this author was partially supported by Spanish MINICO, so that's the ministry with the grant. We take all this information and we make it in tables that can be analyzed, right? All right, so in terms of curated metadata, there is obviously a lot of information that we get. If we take just one record in the center here, right? So that's an article published in 2021 in Journal of Advanced Research by 1, 2, 3, 4 authors, right? So we index all authors, okay? Title, abstract, and as I mentioned, 100% author names indexed, researchers working in the field, identify experts. That's what you can do with the authors' names. The Journal of Advanced Research, click on it, you'll have some information about the impact, as well as the ranking, its ranking in its category in the Web of Science core collection journal citation reports. The funders, we started capturing the funders since in 2008, and we have more than 20 million records with funding information. There is also a classification, several ways of classifying papers. So this is a science and technology paper, of course, but you can be more precise. This is in clinical life sciences and so on, all the way down to a topic. And it's also contributing to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, right? So that's another classification. In terms of institutions, we capture all of them. So here, all these authors are based in Czech Republic, and that's a collaboration between 4 authors, but it's also a collaboration between 2 affiliations, right? You even get the email address. That's also available in the platform. And then you have what we call the citation network. This paper was cited 92 times. That makes it a highly cited paper. That's a paper in the top 1%. And this paper cited 141 references. So if you read the paper, in the list of references, you'll find 141 references. With the addresses, you can, of course, do some analysis at the country level, the institutional level, view and identify top performing centers of excellence, and monitor collaboration. So this is a national collaboration or a domestic collaboration, a collaboration between 2 institutions of the same country, right? You can even go deeper if you have clean data. Imagine that Danny Dordevich here is now affiliated to this institution and now moves out from Czech Republic and goes to the US or goes to China. Then this change of affiliation can be interpreted as a mobility, right? So this is also something that can be done with addresses. So this data enables research excellence. So we enable different institutions. So more than 9,000 institutions rely upon the Web of Science, and 75% of all research assessments use Web of Science data, right? So again, publisher neutral journal selection and continuous human curation, meticulous metadata capture and construction, and objective guidance on research integrity and best practices for responsible research evaluation since 1964. The goal is to help you make confident decisions throughout the research lifecycle. So researchers with access to literature, benchmarking literature, having discovery tools, but research managers, research evaluators, they have different needs, right? Moving on moving to the journal citation reports, something that we worked on and you might have seen in the past few years, we enhanced the responsible journal evaluation. So in terms of history, going back to past few years, let's say nine years ago, in 2015, we provided more indicators, right? There was already a strong focus on the journal impact factor, but that's only one metric. And we talk about journal profiles, not just one metric, which is the journal impact factor, right? So we provided in 2014 or 2015, we started to provide in 2015 more indicators, such as the journal impact factor percentile, which gives you a more precise understanding of the overall impact of a journal in its category. In 2018, we provided more data transparency on the journal impact factor. Anyone can see how the journal impact factor is calculated. You have the formula, but you also get the data sources. In 2020, we introduced the gold open access data in journal citation reports. In 2021, we provided normalized indicators and we expanded the content. We added arts and humanities as well as emerging source citation index journals and the new journal citation indicator into journal citation. Last year, we simplified. Now every journal in the core collection receives a journal impact, and that creates a complete profile for the journals. The initial question asked by Dr. Eugene Garfield, that you can see in the top, who's the founder of ISI in the Web of Science, as well as the other platforms, journal citation reports. Dr. Eugene Garfield said, the GCR answers these basic questions. Who uses a particular journal? Who uses a particular journal? How frequently? For what purposes? And that remains at the core of what the journal citation reports does. So you want to know who's using a journal, how frequently, for what purposes. This evolution of journal citation reports is also powered by the responsible use of metrics. So we do have access to a lot of data and content, but how you use these metrics makes a difference. So we also called for a responsible use of metrics, right? Dr. Eugene Garfield, going back to the paper that presented the journal impact factor, he conceptualized the journal impact factor as an indicator not intended to be used in the evaluation of individual articles, nor in the evaluation of researchers. It's called the journal impact factor. So it is an indicator calculated for journals, not for papers and not for researchers. It is a journal indicator. You can go back and read his papers published in 1986, 1999, and more recently in 2006. ISI, so this is another report published last year, June 2023. It's called Unpacking Research Profiles, Moving Beyond Metrics. So ISI has always defended that bibliometrics are not a substitute for peer review, right? So it should be a complementary analysis of peer review, expert review, right? So this is a good complement in research evaluation. If you want to evaluate someone, you just don't do that focusing only on numbers, right? Peer review is also, it is actually important, and that would be the main way of doing research assessment. In 2008, 2009, our colleague David Penderberry advocates the use of multiple indicators and the responsible use of the journal impact factor. So this is something that we've been saying for the past few decades at Clarivate, Thomson Reuters, Thomson Scientific, and before, right? When we use bibliometrics, you just don't use one indicator or one single metric. You use multiple indicators in addition to peer review, right? So if you look at the current scientific literature in scientometrics, it validates the use of publication and citation analysis as a complement of peer review for research evaluation. When you do peer review, you don't have a full picture, and the scientometrics provide a complement analysis, complementary information to peer review assessment. In 2023, so we've written a white paper with recommendations for decision makers on published criteria and to offer useful metrics for research evaluation under university law in Spain and Cora. So this is a report that was done that is also recommending a responsible use of metrics by decision makers. You can read more about how ISI Clarivate supports or the research integrity and safeguards the research integrity, right? So that's what we're saying on the left-hand side. You can see a screenshot of ISI report. understanding our shared responsibility for a sustainable scholarly ecosystem. And we also provide 2 courses in our Web of Science Academy. The first one is called Good Citation Behavior. How do you cite? And the second one is about an introduction to ethical publishing behavior. So we do support the global research community with publisher neutral guidance, as well as action to protect research integrity. So this is a key statement here. As part of the responsible use of metrics, it is important to use many indicators and contextualize their use in a purposeful manner. It asks researchers evaluation versus journal evaluation, right? So you don't use journal indicators to evaluate researchers, right? Or you don't use journal indicators to evaluate the publication. Clarivate facilitates many and varied metadata and indicators that are beyond JCR metrics and citation-based indicators. So on this last point, I can mention the peer review activity. So if you look at a researcher, we just don't do publishing, right? We just don't write papers and publish them. We do many other things, teaching and so on. One activity which often goes unseen is the peer review that researchers do. In the Web of Science, you can showcase your peer review activity. Something important as well is the intentional collaboration, industry collaboration. So this is something that you want also to showcase when you work with colleagues outside your country or colleagues from different sectors like the industry. You have up to 6 open access indicators available in the platform, in Insights, where you want to maybe showcase the distribution of your papers by open access type. And something that I've discussed recently with an institution here in the Middle East, where they wanted to have a visibility of research data that their researchers have produced. So when you do research, when you conduct research, you produce data, not only data sets, but softwares, scripts, different analysis and so on. And that is also an output that needs to be shown at the researcher level. So that goes beyond journal citation metrics and citation-based indicators. Also, very recently, 2 years ago, we provided the context of citations. So we break down how an article has been cited based on available data on the context of citations and fragments of citing articles. So you would have the position of the citation in the paper, if your paper was cited in the introduction, in the methods, in the discussion, and so on, and the context as well. So you would have, is it a citation that is supporting the work? Is it a citation that is contradicting, that differs, and so on? Or is it just basis, literature review, and so on? But funding information as well. So this is something that I've done recently at the country level, where you can have an analysis of who's funding research by country or for a region. So you have funder type, you have the main funders, and you can track production. And you can, of course, do that at the researcher level. So this is obviously not based on citations. So you would have a differentiation between researchers who managed to get funding, right? And those who didn't get funding, for example, right? And you could do that by field and so on. So the author's position in papers is also an interesting indicator. So you'd have, so if you go for a specific researcher in the platform, let's say a researcher has 10 publications, I want to know if that researcher is often the first author, last author, or corresponding author. So starting from 2008, you would have a breakdown, and you say out of 10, let's say 50% of these 10 publications, the first author, he's the first author, and then 25%, or actually I would say, yeah, the other 50%, he's the last author and the corresponding author at the same time. So this is also available in the platform. In Insights, I don't want to scare you, but these are the indicators that some of them I mentioned earlier. So you have indicators related to production in Insights, which are basically volume of publication, volume of citations. Impact indicators, you have proportion of documents in top 1%, number of documents in top 1%, and so on. You have normalized indicators, collaboration indicators, for example, domestic collaboration, international collaboration, or collaboration with the industry. I talked about the authorship position. So if an author has 100 publications, I want to know the proportion of papers where that author is the first author. So that's the proportion, and then I would have the number of papers where the author is the first author, right? Then you have indicators related to or coming from essential science indicators. So if a researcher has 100 papers, what's the proportion of papers that are in the top 1%, right? or top 0.1%. Again, related to the impact indicators. Open access, so you have the number of documents and then you have the percentage. So if an author has 100 documents, what's the proportion of open access documents and proportion of gold documents and so on, so you get the breakdown. And then you have indicators coming from journal citation reports. These are journal indicators. So if a researcher has 100 papers, what's the proportion of papers with published in journals with journal impact factor in Q1 journal, Q2 journals, and so on, right? You would even have the impact factor without self-citation. So that, that starts to be a bit complex, but that gives you, each and every indicator gives you an idea of certain dimension, certain perspective. Okay, peer review. So as part of the open science movement, we also answer the call for open and or transparent peer review. And that helps to improve research integrity and reproducibility, decrease fraudulent peer review, and discourage manipulation of the peer review process. Something that you will see in the Web of Science, that's an interesting example. So this is an article, review, sorry. So this is a review published in Royal Society, Open Science, that's a journal. And then you see the different rounds. So this review went through 2 rounds of revision. So you have the first 2 rounds of peer review. So this review went through 2 rounds of peer review. The first one with the decision letter, 29th of November 2021. You have the reviewer report, so 2 reviewers, and then you have the decision letter, right, with the author response. So it's directly linked, discoverable, open, citable, and that's integrated within the record in the Web of Science. The way you can see such open peer review report in the Web of Science, you have a filter on the left-hand side in any search that you do. In this case, I have 406 peer review reports that are open, and I can simply analyze them. So you can easily discover them and identify articles that have been reviewed using open, transparent processes. The good thing about that is that you gain insights into the development of a research idea with peer review details, so you can see how peer reviewers have responded to the initial contribution and how the paper has evolved over time. You can, of course, explore reviewer comments. For PhD candidates, I also give this as a tip. Go and have a look at how peer review works in reality. So you have those open peer review. And there is more to come. This is the 2024 roadmap just for the Web of Science. Again, on these 3 focus areas: research integrity, research effectiveness, and research impact. First half of 2024, reproducibility data that is coming in the Web of Science. Refine profiles, curation workflow, so you'll be able to curate your profile in an easier way, add publication and make corrections more easily. We already released the AI research assistant, where you can collect and get a quick summary of research with the help of artificial intelligence. In terms of research impact, we want to help researchers showcase their contributions to peers and evaluators, so you can update, do bulk updates to research profiles. And we recently launched the grants index. I'm actually conducting a webinar on 12th of March about this, where I will present the grants index. And that helps to inform proposal and funding strategies. So you can explore who's funding research with awarded grant data, right? So you can have a look at who has been funded. In the second half of 2024, so you'll have more data about how research was retracted, that is with Retraction Watch. You will be able to export directly to EndNote groups. Instead of exporting to EndNote, you can directly export to EndNote groups. You'll be able to locate more research on the platform through non-English searches, so there will be translated search, organizations available on researcher profiles, and policy citations to articles, where we make a link between published literature and policy documents. We're exploring other concepts for 2025 and beyond for research integrity, highlighting citations from retracted content. So if you've been cited by a retracted paper, you want to know about that citation. Data sets linked to researcher profiles to support easier discovery of data. As of now, data sets are not there yet. And in terms of research impact, more data about clinical trials and altmetrics to include trusted newspaper content mentions directly in their platform. So here I share more resources and references that you can have a look at. So our path to launching transparent peer review started in 2017 when Clarivate acquired Publons. We started transparent peer review with Wiley in 2018. Then other publishers followed, IOP Publishing, Royal Society, Emerald Publishing in 2019, MIT Press in 2020, right? And this is generally now available on ScholarOne for anyone, for any journal using ScholarOne as manuscript submission management tool to provide open, transparent peer review, right? A few links or the list of references that I mentioned during today's webinar will be shared with you in the presentation. We're right on time. I'll just have a look at the questions, if any. So let me just have a look at questions and the chat. Okay, so there's a question from Reem who says, I publish a conference article in a journal indexed. So is a conference article considered as an article? It can be counted as one or not. And my second question is, I found some journals that are indexed until 2022. Does this mean that they are not indexed anymore? Does it mean that the data is not updated? Yeah, so for the first question, so it really depends on the document type. Some conferences publish conference proceedings, but they are also publishing them in journal issues. So it's very common to see conference proceedings being also published as article, right? So these would be like special issues. But you also have a common way of publishing, which is a conference proceeding is published as a conference proceeding. It is not an article. The reason is a conference proceeding doesn't go through the same peer review process. It doesn't have the same length. Very often a conference proceeding is a paper that is about research in progress, so it's not definitive. So these are, differences between a journal article and a conference. For the second question, does it mean that the data is not updated, or does this mean that they don't index the journal anymore? So you have to check. You have to check sometimes if it shows only 2022. In this case, the journal stays in the database, but you will not find new content, meaning it has been dropped end of 2022 or in 2023, but you don't find other papers, new papers, because the journal has been dropped. So you need to check. In master journal list, for example, you would see if the journal is still there in the platform, it means that it is still indexed. And you also have the monthly changes, right? So if I show you here, if I go master journal list, right, and if I search for, let's say anything, Africa, we do have journals there. Yeah, so did you mean this journal? So I find 219, let's say this one, for example. This means that this journal is still indexed in Imaging Source Citation Index, which is a collection in the Web of Science core collection, right? Okay, so there is another question. We have time for another question. Yeah, there's a question slightly off topic, which is, I want to know the first step to publish my first paper. I will share with you a guide that I wrote that gives some steps on how to publish the first paper. All right, thank you very much, everyone. If you have any question, feel free to contact me. Let's stay in touch. Thank you very much, everyone, for your presence. I wish you all the best. Take care. Bye-bye.